The Michigan Wolverines are one of the most storied programs in college football history, and they're always near the top in just about everything. It has been a minute since they won a national championship though, and ever since Lloyd Carr left, they've been trying to find that next head coach that would bring them back to the top. Rich Rodriguez did not work out, Brady Hoke continually got worse, and then they made the hire that everyone thought was going to change the ball game forever. In 2015, they hired Jim Harbaugh to be their next head coach, and he truly was a Michigan man. The team showed some flash in 2015, but then the following season, they had a real opportunity to make the college football playoff. In today's video, I want to talk about that 2016 Michigan football team, go through the entire season, all the major storylines, and why they almost made the playoff. It's going to be a pretty fun documentary, and right before we get started, I want to thank you guys for 50,000 subscribers. It means a lot, and now we are on the road to 100K, and nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed, so it would really help me out if you could hit that subscribe button, and I would greatly appreciate it. Now let's get started and talk about the 2016 Michigan Wolverines. We need to go back 1 year to see how the first season under Harbaugh would go. It was quite a fascinating year as they lost in week 1 to Utah, but then started to become dominant. They beat number 22 BYU and number 13 Northwestern in dominating shutout fashion, and then towards the end of the season, things got pretty weird. They lost on the road to Michigan State in the famous punt game. They beat Minnesota by way of a goal line stand. They survived a double overtime game on the road against Indiana, went on the road and beat Penn State, and then they had a major showdown with Ohio State. Unfortunately, they would end up getting blown out in that game, but they would still qualify to play in the Citrus Bowl, where they would beat number 19 Florida 41-7, and things were looking really good in year 1. Going into 2016 though, there would be some changes. Defensive coordinator DJ Durkin was one of the top names in all of college football, and he left to take the head coaching job at Maryland. They also lost a couple other guys, and the school signed with Nike. The team had some pretty fun players, including one of the most polarizing names in college football, Jabril Peppers, a first-team All-American corner in Jordan Lewis, a tight end by the name of Jake Butt, and finally Wilton Speight was the team's quarterback. Expectations were very high going into the 2016 season, but there were some question marks. At the quarterback spot, you would have Wilton Speight, who was good, but not necessarily elite. His backups were John O'Corn, a transfer from Houston, and Shane Morris, who was a big-time blue-chip recruit coming out of high school. You also can't forget to look at that 2016 recruiting class that was headlined by the number 1 recruit in the country, Rashawn Gary, and 12 other 4-star recruits, which included a top 100 quarterback by the name of Brandon Peters. At the running back spot, you basically had 4 different options. Davion Smith was the main man, but guys such as Chris Evans, Karan Higdon, and Ty Isaac would also play a role, and Jabril Peppers could pretty much do a little bit of everything. You also cannot forget Khalid Hill, who would actually end up leading the team in touchdowns at the fullback position. This team did not pass a whole lot, but they had 3 really solid weapons in Amara Darboh, Jake Butt, and Jehu Chesson. The defense was obviously anchored by guys like Jabril Peppers, Jordan Lewis, Ben Gedeon, Mike McCray, and DeMonte Thomas, and everything was set up for a pretty good 2016 season. They began the year ranked number 7 in the AP poll, and they would have a home matchup with the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. In that game, the Wolverines would dominate from the very beginning, as true freshman Chris Evans would go for over 100 yards, and Wilton Speight would toss 3 touchdowns. The first semi-difficult game of the season would come at home against UCF. This was a year before the Knights would really take off, and in this game, Wilton Speight would have one of his best games of his career as he threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and wide receiver Amara Darboh would have 2 scores and over 100 yards receiving. The team was now 2-0, headed into a matchup with Colorado. The Buffalo were one of the surprise teams of the 2016 season, as they actually ended up going to the Pac-12 championship game. It was close, and Michigan would actually have to make a comeback, and aided by the injury to Colorado's quarterback Sifo Lufau, the Wolverines would pull away in the second half and win 45-28 en route to a 3-0 record, and they were now a top 4 team in the nation. The following week, they would play Penn State, and as a team, they'd run for 326 yards and 6 touchdowns as they would beat the Nittany Lions 49-10, and all of a sudden people were saying this team was legitimate. The following week, they'd play a 4-0 Wisconsin team who was ranked number 8 in the country, and in a classic defensive matchup, Michigan would take home the W 14-7, and they were now 5-0. From there, they'd have one of the most dominating wins in school history as they would beat Rutgers 78-0. Jabril Peppers really made a name for himself in that game, and pretty much every scholarship player saw the field. It would continue to be easy sledding for them as they would beat Illinois 41-8, and in that game, Karan Higdon would break out. They would get a little bit of a test from a 2-5 Michigan State team, but Amara Darboh would have a career night as they would win 32-23, and Michigan was now ranked number 2 in the country. In their next game against Maryland, DJ Durkin would return back to the Big House, but it was not enough for them to take the win, as Michigan would win 59-3, and it was never even remotely close. At this point, Michigan was arguably the best team in the country. No one had really even given them a test, and it seemed like they were going to be a lock for a college football playoff spot, and that Jim Harbaugh had everything figured out. Then, the Iowa game hit. Michigan would have to go on the road to Kinnick Stadium to play a 5-4 Iowa team. As many people know, Iowa is a very difficult team to beat, especially when they are at home, and this felt like a trap game from the very beginning. While the Wolverines would take a 10-0 lead, it always seemed like the Wolverines were going to eventually pull away, but they could not. Kenny Allen would hit a 51-yard field goal at 9 minutes to go in the game, and Michigan would take a 13-11 lead, but Iowa made just enough plays to get into field goal range, and as we all know, they hit a game-winning field goal and beat Michigan 14-13, leaving them with a loss, and their perfect season was now over. Wilton Speight struggled tremendously in this game, and Iowa really played their best football that night. Things would take an interesting turn as Wilton Speight had apparently suffered a collarbone injury, so now John O'Korn was thrown into the mix. As I stated earlier, he had a breakout season for the Houston Cougars and transferred to Michigan to try to be the starter. It looked like he was going to be the starter after spring ball, but Speight would end up beating him out, but now it was O'Korn's time to shine. In a home matchup against Indiana, you could say he would struggle a little bit as he only went 7 of 16 for 59 yards, and that alone was not enough to get the job done. Thankfully, Davion Smith would go for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Wolverines would survive an upset bid from the 5-5 Indiana Hoosiers, and they would win 20-10, and now they would be 10-1 going into their matchup with Ohio State. This game would be a winner-take-all spot for the Big Ten East, a spot in the Big Ten Championship, and a likely spot in the college football playoff. In what many say is one of the best games of the 2010 college football decade, this game went back and forth. Malik Hooker would have the first touchdown of the game for Ohio State, but after a Khalid Hill touchdown, the Wolverines would lead 10-7 going into the second quarter. Speight would throw a touchdown, and then Ohio State running back Mike Weber would score a touchdown as well, and going into the fourth quarter, Michigan was on top. It went back and forth, but with 1 second left on the clock, Ohio State would hit a game-tying field goal to send it to overtime. From there, JT Barrett would score a touchdown, and then Amara Darboh would catch a touchdown pass from Wilton Speight, and this game was now headed to double overtime, tied up at 24. Ohio State's defense would hold, as Michigan would have to settle for a field goal. From there, on fourth down, JT Barrett scrambled, and in one of the most controversial calls of all time, they gave him the first down when many people believed he was just short. But if you ask a Michigan or pretty much any other fan, they'd say he is short, but if you ask an Ohio State fan, they say he got it, and the debate will never be settled. On the very next play, would take a run 15 yards for a touchdown, and Ohio State would win 30-27, and Michigan's opportunity was now done. It was an extremely difficult loss for the Wolverines, but they would get an opportunity to get revenge in the Orange Bowl. They'd be matched up against number 11 Florida State, who at the time was 9-3. This Seminoles team was led by Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Francois, and Michigan just could not put it all together as they had to settle for a ton of field goals. With just under 40 seconds left to play, DeAndre Francois would complete a pass to Nyquan Murray as Florida State would take a 33-30 lead, but the extra point was blocked, and Michigan was now just down 1. Unfortunately, on fourth down, Speight would throw a pick, and the season would end with a loss and a 10-3 record. This was extremely difficult for the Michigan fanbase, as it seemed they were so close to making the college football playoff, and I do believe that they were one of the 4 best teams of the 2016 season. That Michigan team would have 11 players get drafted, and will go down as one of the most talented teams in recent memory. Unfortunately, they could not win that game on the road against Iowa, and they were 1 missed field goal or 1 bad call away from winning that Ohio State game, and if they had gone to the Big Ten Championship, they would have rematched against Wisconsin, where I would have taken the Wolverines, and because of that, it means that Michigan would have been in the 2017 college football playoff. This team was a lot of fun, and I hope you Michigan fans did enjoy today's video, and be sure to let me know your thoughts. What are some of the best teams that never made the playoff? Will Michigan football ever get back to national title relevance? And who will be the next head coach after Jim Harbaugh is inevitably fired in the near future? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section. Let me know a team that I could take a look at next. like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. And check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my documentary about the 2016 Colorado Buffaloes. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.